Well, I just saw the sunrise over the hill. Never used to give me much of a thrill. But hey man, now I'm really living. Do you know what it's like to care too much?
Eels is the name of an American alt-rock band or project led by Mark Everett, whose stage name is E. So there's been quite a large turnover of members, apart from E, for recording and touring. Sometimes it's just officially just him. Sometimes it includes other people. He released 2 albums as E, in 1992 and 1993, and in 1996 the first Eels album was released, and the album Eels Time was the 15th Eels album, released in 2024. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is the sixth Eels album, sixth album under the Eels name rather than the E name, which he used before that. It's my first time listening to this album, but I'm a reasonable fan of Eels. I was more of a fan for a while when I first discovered them in the 90s, and this was kind of, my interest faded. It often does. It's not any particular reflection on Eels. It's just that I had a bit of a bubble of going, yeah, I really like Eels, and I got a few of the albums, but not this one. This is about just after that bubble of interest from myself happened. It's a long album. It's a double album. It's 93.5 minutes long. Most of the songs are fairly short, so there's a total of 33 songs on this album, which is quite a list. So I'm going to try and do some description, which is what I always try and do. So it's slightly off the wall approach to music. It's got definitely kind of thinking about textures. It uses fairly drums. I mean, to me, the Eels sound is kind of fairly light drumming and some twinkly music boxes, but it ranges from quiet, almost acoustic, to fairly upbeat and almost poppy. At times there are strings and pads. Generally, it's quite mellow, and I would describe it as being kind of in the lighter end of the rock spectrum, but with a kind of alternative approach to sounds generally. And it's got a slightly melancholy feel to it, but it's a nice feel. I like it. So this mellow and melancholy feel is aided quite a bit by the fact that it's got a really distinctive voice. It's laid back. It's got a bit of that kind of phlegmy brokenness to it that has been used very well by people like Bob Dylan, etc. And he comes across as being somewhat vulnerable, but also with a certain amount of cynicism to him. And that's just kind of, I think this is just natural of the way that his voice is, but he uses it well to get those kind of feels, I think. The songs are mostly here about personal stuff. It's quite self-deprecating at times. There's a nice track about, it sounds like somebody set him up for a date and he's explaining all the reasons why this person has been set up for this blind date. It might just run screaming from him. He comes across as being slightly damaged and vulnerable, which kind of, those words are the same words that I've used to describe his voice, I think. It has generally that kind of feel to it. So what I try and avoid doing too much of is referencing other albums. I try particularly not to spend too long referencing other albums in the catalogue of an artist, because I want these reviews to be reviews that somebody can dip into if they don't know the rest of an artist's stuff. I'm going to fail on this occasion because I feel like I do want to refer back to some of the earlier albums. For me, this is where there's a bit of disappointment in this album, that it doesn't have the same kind of darkness and deep brokenness of some of the earlier albums. There's some really poignant songs on some of the earlier albums. And I think that this is more accessible, but I feel it's lost something in its depth in the process of becoming more accessible, maybe just maturing, possibly just becoming happier in life. And maybe that's what, if that's the truth, then I'm glad for him. This is the way his life went. My biggest negative, though, for this album is that it's long. It's so long. He has plenty to say, but it just feels interminable. And it's like yeah, half of this would have been it probably would have been got a better mark than this, because I just kept feeling yet another song. Here we go again, and whatever. And it's not that they're bad songs. It's just I felt like the scope of it wasn't right somehow in that. So that's kind of a bit of a negative. I have to say, though, generally, he's a great songwriter, and there's some really nice songs here. It's if you know other Eels stuff, musically, it's spot on as Eels all the way. And but if you like the really kind of somewhat disturbing stuff of the earlier albums, then maybe like me, you'll find this a little disappointing. However, whatever it is you think about this album, I'd love to know. I've told you what I think, so why don't you tell me what you think by leaving me a comment down there in the comments, and that's it from me for now.
If you see Natalie, send along this message. I know that you've been through an awful lot of late. Girl, steady the trembling hand.